Have you ever felt like something profound was missing even after years of faithfully following traditions you grew up with? What if the spiritual answers you've been seeking aren't in a distant heaven, but quietly breathing within your own heart? In this eye-opening video, we dive deep into a transformative shift that's unfolding right now, where age-old structures of religion are giving way to a powerful, personal connection with the sacred. If you have ever sensed there might be a deeper, more authentic way to experience spirituality, this message is for you. Stay with us until the very end to uncover how you can reclaim this inner wisdom and finally experience the divine on your own terms. And if this resonates with you, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Your support means the world and helps us keep delivering soulful content straight from the heart. One by one, structures once deemed sacred are losing their hold on us. Temples that once bustled with fervent worship are gradually emptying, while voices that once thundered from pulpits and podiums are now echoes in distant corners of memory. Statues, icons, and relics once venerated with trembling awe have grown silent in their stony stillness. Yet this is not a story of faith's demise. It is the emergence of something older, something far more primal that is stirring in the marrow of our beings. For generations, many of us were taught that truth exists outside ourselves, that redemption must be delivered by an external figure more sanctified or wise than we are. We were told heaven was far away, a celestial prize awarded only to those who followed a strict path or bowed low enough, often with eyes cast downward in reverential fear. But what if our innate link to the sacred was never meant to be filtered through hierarchies of power? What if the greatest temple is and has always been rooted in the living essence of who we are? Pause for a moment and consider, have you not felt in the quiet corners of your mind that sense of wanting to kneel in awe, not before an idol or an altar, but before the soft glow of your own inner knowing? Once we listened to all these outer authorities, believing them to be the only gatekeepers of cosmic truth. Yet in the stillness of late-night wonder, or in the sigh of a moment alone with nature, we catch a whisper that does not come from institutions, doctrines, or even revered texts, but from a place within our very selves. It's a whisper that asks, what if the real path to what you call God can be found in your every breath, your every quiet epiphany, your simple moments of existing with awareness? This whisper is neither a rebellion nor a rejection. It's a return to a primal remembrance. For too long, spirituality has been made into a product for purchase, less a holistic journey, more an exchange of blind devotion for a promise of salvation. But we are awakening to the realization that salvation was never something to be bought or sold. This gradual transition can feel disorienting. We may grieve the comfort once found in belonging to a system of belief, or in the predictability offered by well-trodden rituals and prayer. There is an aching nostalgia for the days when it seemed easier to simply accept a prescribed creed without question. Yet a more profound voice calls out, urging us to stand up from that posture of eternal subservience. Our inherent capacity to connect with divinity from the marrow of our bones and the spark of our consciousness was waiting quietly all along, obscured by the noise of centuries of institutional dogma. Now the container itself, be it a church, mosque, temple, or monastery, no longer suffices to hold the fullness of our search for truth. Belief systems, once absolute, have begun to show their cracks. But these cracks are not signs of impending darkness. They are places where the light of genuine spiritual sovereignty leaks through, guiding us toward a more intimate union with the sacred presence that lives within us. This is not an ending, it is a birth. It heralds the rise of a new way to experience the divine, no longer an external searchlight scanning the horizon, but a radiant glow pulsing at the center of our own being. The old age of spiritual life is characterized by the shadow of fear, hierarchy, and reliance on intermediaries. But we are moving into an era often referred to as the age of Aquarius, an energetic shift described in both astrology and global consciousness that demands a new framework for spiritual connection. For more than 2,000 years, humanity has been moving through what astrologers call the age of Pisces. Pisces, a water sign, invites emotional depth, faith, compassion, and the willingness to surrender to something greater than ourselves. Those centuries birthed numerous religious traditions, from Christianity's symbol of the fish to the rise of Islam, from extensive Hindu rituals to Buddhist monasteries perched on mountains. These systems, in their purest forms, offered a much-needed container for spirituality during times when the world seemed permeated by darkness, warfare, and ignorance. They served as a bridge from a place of fragmented understanding to a realm of deeper, more unified human awareness. Yet with Pisces also came illusions, blind faith that could be manipulated, martyrdom that was sometimes revered above, living a balanced, wholehearted life, and layers of dogma that stifled genuine spiritual inquiry. In that age, religion often provided a moral compass, a sense of belonging, and a path toward redemption. At the same time, we were told that true salvation lay somewhere else, some far-off heaven waiting beyond the horizon of death, or in a deity's hands that we must appease. Over time, the structures that emerged around these teachings developed hierarchies, priests, popes, imams, and gurus, each holding keys we were convinced we needed to unlock the gates of salvation. While many such leaders were initially wise guides, they also became gatekeepers who eventually restricted access to the divine. This shift in spiritual leadership from teachers and mystics to rigid authorities and institutions resulted in a type of relationship with God that was predicated on fear and obligation. Obedience, rather than direct experience of the sacred, became the hallmark of being religious. Over centuries, religion also intertwined with politics, power, and control, which diluted the original intentions of love service and spiritual awakening. Many revered scriptures, which contained luminous truths encoded in metaphors and parables, were selectively interpreted to validate conquest, justify oppression, and fuel the illusion that only a designated few could attain divine favor. Now that moment of transformation is upon us. As we leave behind the age of Pisces, we find ourselves at the cusp of a great transition, stepping into the age of Aquarius, a time distinguished by innovation, disruption of the old ways, and an insistence on self-knowing. The energetic blueprint of Aquarius is not content with reverence alone. It seeks to shatter illusions, freeing us from any dogma that implies we are powerless. Institutions that once wielded influence over spiritual life now find it harder to command blind allegiance. Individuals are reclaiming direct access to source energy, the universal life force that animates all existence. They are rediscovering themselves not as flawed beings awaiting redemption, but as co-creators of reality, capable of embodying divinity through every breath, every choice, every courageous act of self-inquiry. When we explore the continuum of religious tradition, we see that at the dawn of these great faiths, there were genuine revelations, heart-centered teachings of compassion, and living examples of true devotion. Prophets, messiahs, saints, and bodhisattvas arrived on the scene carrying messages of love, forgiveness, and spiritual transcendence. Yet as centuries passed, many of these teachings underwent profound distortion. Their core was often lost in translation or intentionally twisted to align with the agendas of political empires, religious power structures, and cultural dominance. What had been mystical pathways for personal transformation became mechanisms of control, each one insisting it was the sole custodian of ultimate truth. Piscean spirituality thrived on the notion of a savior or external agent of redemption. This model might have been vital during periods when humankind was in many ways childlike in its spiritual growth, easily swayed by external threats and in dire need of moral frameworks. These religious institutions offered myth, ritual community, and a moral code to guide the faithful. They taught us to look outside ourselves for hope and protection. Simultaneously, religions provided vital support systems, places to share experiences, find solace in hardship, and develop empathy for neighbors. However, embedded in these traditions was a latent concept of martyrdom and sacrifice. Pain and suffering were sometimes deemed noble paths to holiness. Blind faith without questioning or deeper understanding was seen as a virtue. Entire generations were reared to believe that doubt was a sin, and that without religious edicts to follow, they would descend into chaos. Over time, moral codes gave way to dogmatic absolutes. Scriptural texts, once a living bridge to higher wisdom, were dissected, memorized, and drilled into the faithful, sometimes stripped of their transformative essence. The cosmic and symbolic layers that once lit the seeker's heart with insight were overshadowed by literal interpretations that could justify violence, exclusion, and condemnation. Yet something remarkable has been happening within the cracks. Despite oppressive interpretations, many faithful communities have nurtured saints and mystics who embodied divine love and selfless service. Some stood up for social justice, defended the vulnerable, and lived among the poor. The age of Pisces had both a luminous face of mercy and compassion, as well as a dark face of oppression and distortion. Now that we stand at the precipice of something new, we begin to see that the doorways of human consciousness are swinging open. We realize that hierarchical religion was a necessary stage in our collective soul growth, but it is not the ultimate destination. The new frequency stirring in the collective psyche calls us inward, inviting us to take responsibility for our own spiritual journey. This is not a violent overthrow. It is a quiet but unstoppable revolution in how we perceive and experience the sacred. Where once we waited for a mediator or a teacher to show us the path, now our direct communion with the Source becomes self-evident. The structures of authority that guarded our spiritual lives for centuries, those that once served a protective function, are now showing signs of fatigue. They were never inherently evil. Indeed, many arose from the genuine need to shepherd communities through times of uncertainty. Consider the early centuries of religious expansion. The masses were largely illiterate, living in precarious conditions, oppressed by feudal systems. Providing them with moral codes, spiritual stories, and a glimmer of hope was of immeasurable significance. Without these structures, many more might have succumbed to the vicissitudes of a brutal world. Yet as every system grows, it also calcifies. Over time, the vibrant teachings once flowing like a river became static reservoirs of religious authority. Saints turned into icons. Prophets became figureheads frozen in time. Dynamic relationships with the divine gave way to rigid protocols. Ceremonies that once echoed with heartfelt devotion turned into rote ceremonies repeated by habit. When these institutions declared themselves the sole arbiters of salvation, they imposed an unwritten spiritual tax on every seeker's soul. Give us your obedience, and we will grant you absolution in return. This dynamic thrived on a version of humanity that was immature, a version conditioned to rely on external validation. In such a context, fear became an effective tool. The fear of eternal damnation, the fear of divine wrath, the fear of excommunication from a community that provided both spiritual and social identity. Yet the evolution of consciousness does not stand still. As societies advanced technologically, scientifically, and morally, more and more individuals questioned the inherited dogmas. The human mind expanded to explore rational thought, while the human heart yearned for direct, unmediated experiences of the sacred. This deeper capacity to question and feel is precisely what threatens the old structures today. When the old establishment feels threatened, it tries to cling to the status quo, doubling down on exclusive claims to truth. But at this moment, more and more people are standing on the threshold, no longer willing to settle for second-hand revelation. They sense something holy is rising within them. They experience glimpses of spiritual phenomena, perhaps through dreams, meditative states, or encounters in nature profound enough to overshadow any formulaic ritual. As such, experiences accumulate, the controlling mechanisms of guilt and shame lose their potency. The notion that an external authority alone can interpret the language of the divine begins to crumble. This is not a war on religion. This is the evolution of our spiritual architecture. We are leaving behind a system that insisted we are helpless sinners in need of external redemption, and embracing a vision of ourselves as sovereign sparks of the infinite, each capable of direct communion with what we might call God's source, the universe, or the all that is. For centuries, the written word was vested with undeniable power. Holy texts, whether the Bible, the Quran, the Vedas, the Torah, or the Tao Te Ching, were regarded as sacred conduits to divine wisdom. In many ways, they were indeed lifelines for communities that had no other access to knowledge or spiritual guidance. These texts were precious containers of myth poetry, insight and counsel often passed down and preserved at great risk. Yet as institutionalized religion took hold, a shift occurred. Instead of inviting seekers to commune directly with the mysteries these texts invoked, religious authorities used their status as official interpreters, binding the texts with dogma. One verse might be used to condemn another to control, while yet another was silenced if it did not align with the prevailing agenda. The luminous messages of love and compassion found in Scripture often took a back seat to passages that could be manipulated to maintain power. Over centuries, chapters and verses were read less as portals to mystical experience and more as legal statutes hammered down in black and white. The question remains, was the problem the text itself, or was it how we weaponized it? Indeed, many of these scriptures were channeled by mystics and seers, whose words shimmered with symbolism meant to open the heart to cosmic truth. But when approached literally, or stripped from their cultural and esoteric contexts, those beautiful passages became rigid laws, forming a cage that limited spiritual growth rather than liberating it. Today, in this Aquarian shift, the same scriptures can be read anew through the lens of intuition and open inquiry. The words that once felt oppressive can reveal hidden layers of wisdom. But doing so requires that we step away from literalism. We must allow the text to speak to the soul, rather than forcing it to serve institutional dogma. This is where personal discernment becomes invaluable. To reclaim Scripture as an evocative mystery, we must meet it as seekers, not as subjects. Moreover, there is a greater text, still the living library found in every cell of our bodies. Ancient mystics from varied traditions have always hinted that the cosmic story is etched into our bones, our DNA, and in the subtle energy fields that envelop us. With technology's advancement, modern science begins to suggest that consciousness interacts with physical reality in ways we're only starting to comprehend. So while we may still find beauty and guidance in passages from sacred books, we're also learning to read the deeper text, the one that resonates in the silent spaces of the heart. Our intuitive insights, dreams, synchronicities, and direct experiences often unlock far more transformative expansions than memorizing pages upon pages ever could. This shift from external canonical authority to internal felt resonance is at the crux of our current evolutionary leap, letting us integrate the ancient wisdom that resonates while discarding that which no longer aligns with our highest truth. We find echoes of the lost threads of direct spiritual experience in the Gnostics and other esoteric traditions that once thrived on the fringes of Orthodox religion. Gnosticism, for instance, taught that the true Christ is a consciousness available to each of us, an inner spark lying dormant until ignited by direct realization. The Gnostics, the Essenes, the Cathars, early Sufis, yogic mystics, and others all ventured beyond exoteric doctrines. They turned inward, attuning themselves to the silent voice within that whispers, "You too are the divine in human form." This was an affront to centralized religious institutions, which relied on the idea that access to the divine must be brokered by priests, saints, or an ordained ecclesiastical hierarchy. Such inner-focused teachings were risky. They threatened the power balance of the time. If people realized that they could connect with the divine without external approval, the institutional hold would diminish. Many of these groups were persecuted, forced underground, or deemed heretical. Scriptures that affirmed inner divinities, such as certain Gnostic gospels, were destroyed or hidden. Their re-emergence in modern times, such as with the Nag Hammadi texts, has provided glimpses into a different spiritual path, one that honors personal revelation over second-hand edicts. These texts describe a reality in which we are not inherently flawed or distant from the sacred. Rather, we have simply forgotten the truth of who we are. In the present, these once ignored teachings are resonating for many who grew disillusioned with dogma. Reinterpreted in a contemporary setting, they affirm that the search for God, for truth, or for cosmic unity is in fact an inside job. Although such knowledge was once a secret or a privilege for the initiated few, we are witnessing a global awakening, a widespread readiness to explore these deeper mysteries. The threat of being branded heretic or blasphemer has lost much of its sting in an era of expanding consciousness and global interconnectivity. This is not a revolution that aims to topple altars and tear down every church. Instead, it's an inward shift that recognizes the altar within, turning worship outward into wonder, curiosity, and direct knowing. Enlightenment is no longer seen as the sole domain of monastic ascetics or saints. Instead, it is unfolding in ordinary people, leading ordinary lives who happen to have extraordinary inner experiences. These awakenings often come unannounced in a moment of heartbreak that opens the heart in a near-death encounter that reshapes one's sense of what is real, or even in the simple silence of a morning meditation. Such encounters highlight the fact that direct contact with the divine is possible for everyone. And as more individuals gather such moments of spiritual clarity, it becomes increasingly evident that the sacred lives within each of us, just waiting for the day we choose to remember it. The fear that drove many to cling tightly to religious systems was not altogether irrational. Without the structures of old who would provide moral guidance and communal support, who would hold us together when the storms of life threaten to wash away all sense of meaning. Historically, religion played that parental role, offering the comfort of a moral framework, the promise of cosmic justice, and the solidarity of shared rituals. People needed something to protect them from despair when their crops failed, when wars raged, or when death took their loved ones. Rituals around birth, marriage, and death gave shape to life's passages, comforting those who were adrift in existential uncertainty. Yet a child eventually grows, and so must we. The moral scaffolding that once served as a stabilizer can become a cage if we never question its premises. In many places, it has become just that. When external rules stifle inner exploration, spiritual maturity stagnates. True faith is not the same as blind obedience. True faith has space for doubt, for wrestling with big questions, for direct personal encounters with the unknown. It acknowledges that while guidance is valuable, it should never replace one's innate ability to sense what is aligned or misaligned. Through centuries of conditioning, many of us were taught to override that inner sense, believing we were too impure or ignorant to trust ourselves. In the quieter corners of the world, and increasingly in the mainstream, we can see a renaissance of spiritual exploration that does not discard ethics, compassion, or community, but roots them in a new foundation. This foundation is the understanding that the divine is not merely an external entity or being, but an ever-present field of intelligence and love that animates life itself. We need not check our minds or bodies at the door to connect with it. We only need to make space within to listen. This reorientation changes everything. It transforms moral action from something done out of fear of punishment or hope of reward into a natural outflow of recognizing our fundamental interconnectedness with all beings. As we mature, we can hold the lineage of our religious traditions with gratitude, acknowledging their role in our formative years, while understanding that they are not the final destination. The attitude shifts from "what do I have to believe" to "what is my direct experience of the sacred people?" Are discovering that the presence of the sacred exists not only in cathedrals or monasteries, but also in mundane acts like doing the dishes, mindfully feeling the earth beneath bare feet, or supporting a friend through hardship. In every breath, the potential for communion is present, and in this realization lies the seed of spiritual sovereignty, a gentle but firm reclamation of our intrinsic link to the divine. Such sovereignty says, I do not need to seek permission to feel God within. I am capable of discerning what fosters love and what fosters fear. The dissolve of religious authority and the rising call for direct experience is starkly visible in the contemporary landscape. In the age of instant information, once guarded teachings have gone mainstream. Ancient practices such as yoga, meditation, breathwork, and plant medicine ceremonies, once limited to monastic lineages or shamanic communities, now reach people worldwide. Traditional religious attendances might be waning, but people gather in record numbers for group meditations, spiritual retreats, and workshops that promise inner transformation. A new lexicon of terms such as consciousness, energy fields, frequency, and vibration has woven itself into our everyday discourse. The question arises, are these just new buzzwords, or do they signify a deepening maturity in how we seek? The sacred skeptics claim that swapping one system for another is just rebranding. Instead of clergy in robes, we have teachers in yoga pants. Instead of church pews, we have meditation cushions. There is truth to this observation. Any movement can become commercialized. Any sincere spiritual pursuit can devolve into another form of escapism or consumerism. Still, something more profound appears to be happening. People are no longer content to recite mantras they do not feel, or to engage in rituals that lack meaning. This shift toward personal authenticity suggests that while some may dabble on the surface for novelty, many individuals are seeking deeper, life-changing experiences. They crave something that resonates in the quietest chambers of their hearts. The internet has also played a major role. It broke down geographical and cultural barriers, allowing seekers to explore global wisdom traditions from the comfort of their living rooms. With a few clicks, one can find lectures on Vedanta, Sufism, Kabbalah, or quantum healing. We can enter virtual communities of fellow seekers who share stories, exchange supportive insights, and experiment with new spiritual techniques. This decentralization of knowledge, a hallmark of the Aquarian age, is both empowering and challenging. On the one hand, it grants unprecedented access to teachings once kept behind temple doors. On the other hand, it can breed confusion, misinformation, and spiritual shortcuts that ignore the depth of inner work required for genuine transformation. Discernment thus becomes the crucial skill in the new spiritual landscape. With so many available paths, how does one choose? The guidance we crave must come from within, guided by resonance. Resonance is a subtle yet unmistakable feeling when something aligns with your innermost sense of truth. It's less about intellectual agreement and more about a visceral, knowing the heart, fluttering the body softening, or a subtle electric current pulsing through your being. When a path or a teacher resonates, it feels like home, a reaffirmation rather than an imposition. And if it doesn't resonate, the Aquarian age encourages us to walk away without guilt or fear, trusting that our path is as unique as our fingerprint. This freedom to choose in alignment with one's own soul is the hallmark of a rapidly maturing global consciousness. We come now to the notion of spiritual maturity. The path ahead demands not only freedom, but also responsibility. It is one thing to break free from old religious structures, and quite another to build a rooted, integrative spirituality in their absence. To declare oneself sovereign is a tremendous step, but it requires an ongoing commitment to self-inquiry, emotional honesty, and the willingness to learn from mistakes. Without this level of integrity, spiritual freedom can slip into chaos or narcissism. The age of Aquarius is about honoring our individuality while recognizing our interdependence. It asks us to hold attention. Yes, the sacred belongs to everyone, but that also means each of us must guard the flame of our own consciousness diligently. Gone is the safety net of external absolution. When a spiritual organization claims to forgive you on behalf of God, it can paradoxically undermine accountability. Now, accountability is ours alone. If we act out of alignment, it is we who must sense the discord in our body and soul, and it is we who must seek to recalibrate. Similarly, spiritual practice is no longer a prescribed set of prayers at designated times. Instead, every moment can be a prayer. Every breath can be a reminder. Every act can be a sacred offering if we choose to bring consciousness to it. This new paradigm also invites us to revisit how we define community. When religious institutions were robust, community was often synonymous with shared beliefs, communal worship, and rigid membership rituals. Now communities form organically around shared resonance, shared intention, and shared devotion to authenticity. A circle of meditators, an online forum of seekers exploring mystical texts, a collective of artists channeling their spiritual insights into creative works. These are the new gatherings. While smaller and more fluid, these communities often provide profound depth of connection, precisely because membership is voluntary and rooted in a genuine calling. In this environment, teachers may still appear, but their roles shift from intermediaries to facilitators. They guide participants toward their own inner knowing rather than dictating universal truth. Hierarchy dissolves into a dynamic interplay where each participant is both student and teacher. Respect for wisdom grows deeper, not out of blind veneration, but out of gratitude for those who have walked certain paths before us. We accept their assistance in recalling truths that lie dormant within ourselves. This fluid, decentralized approach can be disconcerting to those accustomed to the comfort of fixed rules. Yet it is precisely this dissolution of rigid form that allows new life to flow, shaping spiritual expression in ways never before possible. As we complete this first segment of our exploration, let us rest in the knowledge that what appears as the end of religion is in essence the rebirth of the sacred on a grander scale. Far from being a crisis of faith, this is a luminous moment of recreation, a universal invitation to stand in the center of our own spiritual authority. The age of seeking salvation from an external source is merging into the age of direct communion, one where the resonance of our own heartbeat is a valid, sacred text. Many of us have already felt the call, an inexplicable pull, to trust the wisdom that arises in moments of stillness, to be more attuned to the natural rhythms of the earth, and to listen for the divine in the quiet intervals of daily life. This shift is not always comfortable. It may involve leaving behind communities that once provided security, or releasing beliefs that once offered a neatly packaged sense of identity. There can be sorrow, confusion, and even a sense of betrayal as we realize the structures we relied upon might no longer serve our expanding awareness. But these are natural pains of growth, akin to how the shell of a chrysalis must fall away for the butterfly to emerge. Our willingness to move through this discomfort is precisely what frees us to experience a more profound connection with our inner divine spark. We have not lost God. We have lost the notion that God is a remote figure living in the pages of a book or behind altars guarded by gatekeepers. Instead, we find the infinite in the beat of our own pulse, in the hush of a forest, at dawn, in the tear that slips down our cheek, when we remember a truth beyond words. This is a time of decentralization of the sacred, a time when the circle, rather than the pyramid, symbolizes how we gather. We meet eye to eye, soul to soul, each bringing our unique thread of wisdom to the tapestry of collective awakening. And so, part one draws to a close, reminding us that every collapse is also a blooming. The statues might be silent, the pews less crowded, but inside the human soul, there is an awe-inspiring symphony of reawakening. The age of handing over your power is dissolving, replaced by an era of personal and communal sovereignty, a time when revelation springs not from outside authority, but from the unshakable resonance within. This completes part one of our journey. Before proceeding, take a moment to feel into these themes, reflect on your own experience of spiritual shifts, and notice where these words find echoes in your personal path. Then, when you're ready, we shall continue deeper into this exploration in part two. Welcome to part two of this in-depth exploration, a journey into the heart of the age of Aquarius, and the dynamic ways it transforms our understanding of God, spirituality, and community. In this unfolding landscape, traditional notions of salvation, dogma, and authority are no longer the unquestioned pillars they once were. As a collective, we are gradually recognizing that our direct relationship with the sacred was never meant to be outsourced. The centuries of living under spiritual hierarchies served a certain purpose, guiding societies through times of darkness and strife. But now, as the cosmic clock shifts gears, those same structures begin to feel too small for the rising consciousness. The symbol of Aquarius is the water bearer, yet its element is air, signifying intellect, communication, disruption of outmoded systems, and the forging of new paradigms. The energetic hallmark of Aquarius is often described as decentralized networks, grassroots movements, and the empowerment of the individual within the community. Where Pisces ruled through compassion mixed with illusions of separation. And I believe motif Aquarius states I know, and that knowing arises from direct insight rather than acceptance of external mandates. This pivot is not about discarding compassion, but balancing it with clarity. It does not demean faith, but it insists that our faith be enlivened by experiential truth. Each passing day, more people are experiencing a subtle dissonance with traditional religious practices that do not embrace personal resonance. They may still find beauty in the rituals, music, and art that reflect centuries of devotion, but they sense that a deeper essence calls to them the essence that every breath, every step, is an opportunity for prayer and communion. Rather than kneeling before an altar, they discover a sense of reverence while watching sunlight dance on water or feeling a breeze caress their face. It is as though the entire cosmos is becoming a cathedral, a vast, boundless temple, with no walls open to all who are willing to pause and perceive. Such awakenings also expose the pitfalls of spiritual consumerism. In the rush to explore new paradigms, we can become lost in the myriad options available. Workshops, retreats, teachers, and online gurus abound, offering a dizzying array of paths to enlightenment. Some of these paths are indeed sincere, while others exploit the unsteady footing of seekers newly liberated from dogma. True maturity lies in the middle ground, remaining open and curious, while remaining grounded in one's own discernment. We are not here to replicate the old authority structures under new labels, but to forge connections and communities rooted in shared authenticity and reciprocal support. Fundamentally, the age of Aquarius invites us to view ourselves not as mere disciples or devotees, but as co-creators in the ongoing story of consciousness. The spiritual traveler in this new age becomes an explorer, not a pilgrim expecting certain signposts along the way. Sometimes the path is revealed in the simple act of witnessing our own thoughts, noticing our emotional patterns, or sitting quietly with nature's intelligence. And in those sacred junctures of deep presence, we come to realize how intimately and unbreakably we are woven into the fabric of existence. This shift toward individual sovereignty can be disconcerting for those who have relied heavily on external authorities. If we are each responsible for our own path, does that mean chaos reigns? If no single institution holds the official blueprint for salvation, then is everything subjective and up for grabs? Far from it. The Aquarian age is not about moral anarchy or spiritual relativism. It's about recognizing that spiritual truth can be universally felt while being personally interpreted. The paradox lies in discovering unity and diversity, coexisting with perfect harmony. Once entire communities found security in uniform beliefs, the act of publicly reciting creeds or dogmas forged a sense of oneness, even as it sometimes suppressed critical thinking or personal revelation. Today, we see a different approach, smaller, more fluid communities forming around resonance rather than compulsion. Individuals gather in circles online or offline, united not by a mandatory creed, but by a collective intention to grow, to heal, to discover deeper truths, to celebrate life in a way that feels genuine. These are gatherings in which one's unique voice is considered essential to the mosaic. The emphasis is on co-creation, where each participant's perspective is welcomed for the richness it brings. In such circles, the role of a teacher or facilitator also transforms. The archetype of the omniscient guru standing at the pinnacle of a hierarchy is giving way to that of a guide mentor or mirror, someone who can reflect your own inner wisdom back to you. The responsibility lies in both parties. The seeker must remain open to learning, while the guide must remain humble enough to encourage the seeker's sovereignty. When teachers allow questions, doubts, and experimentation, they nurture a space where authenticity thrives. This environment starkly contrasts with older models where questioning could lead to accusations of heresy or disobedience. Simultaneously, we must be cautious not to place teachers of this new era on a pedestal. History has shown us how quickly reverence for a wise mentor can slide into idolatry. People can forget that the power to connect with the divine remains always within themselves. We can appreciate the brilliance of a guide without outsourcing our entire spiritual authority. True guides point us back to ourselves. They do not demand unwavering allegiance or proclaim themselves as the only gateway to higher states of being. Collectively, as old institutions crumble, a radical sense of hope surfaces. We have an unprecedented opportunity to create new structures, ones that are fluid, inclusive, and grounded in mutual respect. The question is whether we can handle the responsibility of such freedom. As illusions fall away, the invitation is to stand eyes wide open in the naked reality of our interconnectedness. It is here that genuine empathy and compassion can flourish. Not because a rulebook told us so, but because we recognize each other as facets of the same living whole, each carrying a piece of the cosmic puzzle. Consider the painful weight of religious trauma, a silent undercurrent in many lives. Religious communities, for all their virtues of togetherness and moral guidance, can also become environments of shame, guilt, and fear. Many people have painful memories of being told their bodies are sinful, their thoughts unclean, or their curiosity unwelcome. Punitive theologies taught that we are born unworthy and must constantly seek pardon. For some, this message lodged deeply in the psyche, leaving scars that hinder self-love and healthy emotional expression. Now, as we unlearn these messages, a vast wave of healing is taking place. Therapy, spiritual coaching, and integrative healing modalities allow individuals to examine the roots of their beliefs and let go of those that cause harm. Journaling, meditation, and breathwork lead many to discover that the guilt they've carried may have been an inherited story, not an ultimate truth. This process can be messy. In letting go of old beliefs, people often find themselves adrift before they anchor in a new sense of self. Yet this period of liminality is rich with possibilities. Many find that beneath the crust of shame there is a vast well of tenderness, strength and insight, a self that was waiting to be seen all along. The emergence of personal sovereignty and spirituality can directly address religious trauma. Instead of defaulting to the notion that a priest or an external savior must absolve us, we learn to step into our own self-forgiveness. We become responsible for how we hold ourselves accountable, set our moral compass, and cultivate compassion. Instead of being policed by fear, we engage our inner compass, guided by empathy and love. This inner-centered approach does not mean we disregard communal wisdom or spiritual tradition. Rather, we integrate these resources in ways that honor our emotional, psychological, and spiritual well-being. In the process of healing, some people feel intense anger toward institutions that perpetuated their shame or guilt. While righteous anger can catalyze transformation, it can also become an energy that traps us if we remain fixated on blame. True healing transcends resentment by acknowledging that while these institutions may have caused real harm, they were also part of a collective evolution. The capacity to forgive oneself, the authorities, and the system emerges, not as a condoning of past injustice, but as a liberation from the shackles of pain. Forgiveness, in this sense, is a personal choice to free one's own energy, opening space for deeper spiritual presence. As more individuals move through this healing journey, we see a larger cultural pattern, a dismantling of the fear-based framework that once made entire societies obedient to oppressive doctrines. People rediscover the inherent worthiness of their existence, the sacredness of their embodied life. They approach their own hearts as sanctuaries rather than polluted terrain. And in doing so, they recover not just from personal scars, but from a collective wounding that told humanity it had to beg for redemption rather than recognize its innate connection to the holy. This wave of healing is part of the heartbeat of the Aquarian era, where each healed individual becomes a radiant node in the network of awakened, compassionate living. Venturing further back into history, we discover clues left by ancient mystery schools. These were secretive institutions that focused on direct experiential understanding of cosmic truth. Far from the domain of mass religion, the mystery schools, be they in Egypt, Greece, India, or other parts of the world, sought to initiate participants into deeper states of knowledge, gnosis. Through ritual symbolic enactments, altered states of consciousness, and the discipline of self-reflection initiates experience transformations that were said to dissolve the illusion of separation and reveal the unity underlying all phenomena. In Greece, the Eleusinian mysteries symbolize death and rebirth through the myth of Persephone's descent and return, demonstrating the cyclical nature of existence. In Egypt, the corridors of temples aligned with sacred geometry to mirror cosmic order. In India, yogis passed down teachings in whispers, guiding students through breathwork, mantra, and meditative absorption to directly perceive the Atman, our true divine self. These pathways didn't rely on the threat of eternal punishment. They hinged on the magnetism of true knowledge, the kind that once felt cannot be forgotten. The secrecy surrounding them was partially protective. Experiential truth was powerful and could disrupt societal control if unleashed indiscriminately. The age of Aquarius can be seen as a collective form of initiation, reminiscent of those ancient schools, except this time it is happening on a global scale. The gates are opening without requiring individuals to travel to hidden temples or swear secrecy. Technology has turned the entire planet into a campus, connecting seekers of all backgrounds. Ancient wisdom and esoteric teachings, once veiled, are now widely published, sometimes thoroughly explained in countless books or demonstrated in online tutorials. Of course, not all of it is legitimate or skillfully presented. Discernment is again essential. Still, the sheer availability of knowledge means that no external force can fully monopolize or conceal these spiritual tools anymore. In this sense, the world is undergoing an initiation, one that demands an upgrade in our collective emotional and intellectual maturity. Instead of cowering before the concept of a wrathful God, we stand invited to co-create with a universe that is participatory and alive. This is the legacy the mystery schools foreshadowed. Their message passed along by adepts and mystics was always that true divinity resides within. The age of Aquarius rips away the curtains so that each person, if they so choose, can discover this truth. We no longer require priests to decipher cryptic verses or to bless us from an external vantage point. We're challenged to become the priest, the temple, and the living scripture all at once. The risk, of course, is that some will dabble superficially wearing the trappings of spirituality as a fashion statement. But for those earnest in their search, the potential for real transformation is unprecedented. We are collectively reawakening a lineage of direct gnosis, stepping into an era when the sacred is recognized, not as something to be passively worshipped, but actively lived. Through this lens, the dissolution of religious conformity is not a downfall, but a graduation to a deeper curriculum, one that demands our full participation in the unfolding mystery of life. In this emerging epoch, the image of a spiritual teacher as a sole repository of divine knowledge is dissolving. The age of Aquarius reframes mentorship, shifting the dynamic from guru-disciple dependency to co-exploration. Historically iconic figures such as the Buddha, Jesus, Lao Tzu, or Rumi offered luminous paths to the infinite, but their messages often became codified into dogmatic systems that overshadowed individual insight. Though they pointed to the kingdom of heaven within, or the clear light of the mind, their words were sometimes used to create strict ecclesiastical hierarchies. Instead of empowering the masses, institutional religion occasionally used these figures' authority to entrench control. Now, the role of a teacher is more akin to a facilitator, someone who holds a mirror for your inner wisdom. Their responsibility is not to provide all the answers, but to pose the right questions, to share tested practices, to walk with you through dark nights of the soul, while you cultivate your own inner guidance. Many modern guides emphasize that while they can offer a toolkit or share insights gleaned from personal journeys, the true teacher always ultimately arises from within. This approach discourages dogmatic belief and encourages self-inquiry. The dissolution of the hierarchical guru model does not mean that we lose respect for those with profound experience or insight. On the contrary, in a world of shallow, instant spirituality, genuine mentors become more valuable than ever. They have the ability to guide seekers through the labyrinth of illusions and pitfalls. The difference is that in this new landscape, no mentor is placed above your own experience of truth. Their role is to remind you of the sovereignty you might have doubted you possessed. When trust is built upon mutual respect rather than submission, the bond can be exquisitely transformative. It's also vital to remember that no one outgrows learning. Even the most awakened individuals discover new lessons as consciousness evolves. The mentor-student dynamic becomes more fluid to evolving souls exchanging perspectives. This recalibration aligns beautifully with the Aquarian ideal of distributed knowledge and collective empowerment. If we see ourselves as spiritual explorers rather than mere followers, we feel empowered to integrate teachings that resonate and set aside those that do not. We learn to trust that the same source of cosmic wisdom that guided saints and sages also flows through us. This understanding removes any excuse for complacency because it places the mantle of responsibility directly on our shoulders. Thus, the teacher of this age does not stand on a pedestal proclaiming, "I have all the answers." Instead, they walk among us, humbly acknowledging that the divine spark is equally present in every heart. Such a perspective fosters a sense of unity, even as it celebrates our diverse journeys. The Aquarian blueprint calls us to a new kind of fellowship learning together while respecting each person's direct line to the sacred. In this dynamic field of shared discovery, spiritual life becomes not a rigid set of steps, but an ongoing dance of revelation, with each participant shining a light that helps the next person see more clearly. Yet in this tapestry of awakening, we must be wary of pitfalls posed by the so-called New Age culture. As the old structures weaken, the marketplace of spiritual ideas expands. Terms like ascension, light work, manifesting, and starseed proliferate in social media feeds. While many of these concepts have roots in authentic esoteric traditions, they can be misunderstood or commercialized, turning genuine spiritual tools into packaged products. The glitz of love and light can, in some circles, overshadow the shadow work necessary for true transformation. Spiritual bypassing is a real concern, where people use feel-good aphorisms to avoid dealing with unresolved emotional wounds or societal injustices. The goal of self-knowledge can become conflated with narcissistic self-absorption if one focuses solely on personal ascension without engaging empathy or responsibility toward others. This veneer of positivity might appear beneficial, but it can stall genuine growth. True healing, by contrast, involves integrating all facets of our being, including trauma, anger, sorrow, and doubt. Only by facing these darker interiors with courage can we emerge into authentic wholeness. In this environment, discernment is a precious skill. It is not cynicism, but the capacity to differentiate between teachings that foster empowerment and those that engender dependency. It means asking, does this practice or path encourage my direct connection with Source? Or does it lead me to rely on a perpetually external solution? Does it help me embrace responsibility for my energy and actions? Or does it provide me with a convenient excuse to bypass accountability? Does it root me more deeply in compassion for myself and others? Or does it isolate me in a bubble of self-centric pursuits? The Age of Aquarius calls us to cultivate a balanced stance, one that honors both our infinite spiritual nature and our finite human vulnerabilities. Being an awakened soul does not mean floating above the human condition. It means living it fully, loving, losing, learning, and growing in every moment. Rituals, crystals, energy work, or channelings can be beautiful tools that open pathways of insight, but they are not the essence of spirituality. The essence remains the capacity to connect to the pulse of life, to align with the deeper currents of love, and to embrace the responsibility that comes with recognizing your own potency. Where old religions might have stifled questioning, the potential pitfall in new spirituality is the opposite, lacking any guardrails at all. Too often people engage with complicated metaphysical notions without grounding in ethical frameworks or psychological maturity. Balancing openness with anchored discernment ensures that we do not simply trade one form of disempowerment for another. Ultimately, spirituality is not about accumulating more concepts. It's about cultivating a direct, embodied relationship with the mystery that breathes us into existence. The cosmic invitation is to stand in that mystery with awe, sincerity, and a willingness to evolve both individually and collectively. With personal sovereignty comes great freedom, yet also the weight of genuine responsibility. After centuries of religious rule, we might relish the newfound autonomy, no longer subject to edicts from authoritative councils or threatened by divine punishment for every moral misstep. But freedom is never a free ride. Spiritual adulthood asks us to stand firm in our decisions. No bishop or cleric is going to absolve our conscience or fix our moral failings. We answer to ourselves, to our communities, and to the larger web of life in which we participate. This sense of responsibility extends beyond our personal sphere. As we awaken to our innate divinity, we also awaken to our collective interdependence. Our actions, even our thoughts and emotional vibrations, have consequences that ripple out into the world. The more conscious we become, the less we can claim ignorance regarding the effect we have on each other. We see that any harmful act, even if it arises from fear or confusion, disrupts the harmony of the collective field. Thus, spiritual awakening is inherently tied to ethical evolution. No dogmatic code or threat of punishment is required to instill this ethic. Recognizing our shared essence naturally evokes compassion and accountability. We also step into creative responsibility. If we are truly sparks of the divine, then we are co-creators with the universe. This implies that our intentions and our focus shape reality, both our internal landscape and to some extent the external one. This perspective is empowering yet humbling. It requires us to examine our motivations, our shadow aspects, and our long-held beliefs. Aligning with our inner truth means shedding layers of conditioning that no longer serve. When we inadvertently cause harm, spiritual maturity prompts us to apologize, make amends, and learn, rather than hiding behind dogma. In light of this new freedom, daily practices take on renewed importance. Meditation, conscious movement, journaling, or prayer, now done not out of obligation, but out of a sincere drive to maintain alignment. These practices keep us steady, particularly when the chaos of everyday life threatens to pull us off center. Far from being optional add-ons, they become anchors, returning us to the wellspring of inner wisdom that remains unshaken by external drama. Paradoxically, as we let go of external guidance systems, our capacity for true community can flourish. When individuals gather from a place of authenticity, not fear or blind obedience, the bonds that form are strong and flexible. There is space for each person's distinct perspective, and conflict can be navigated with empathy and collective problem solving. The vibrational resonance of such communities is powerful. It produces a field of coherence that supports everyone's growth and well-being. Hence, responsibility becomes less about burdensome rules and more about conscious participation in the grand cosmic dance. It is an invitation to show up fully, to harness our freedom in service of creating healing and evolving. This synergy of personal authenticity with communal harmony epitomizes the Aquarian blueprint. Each individual stands confidently in their light, and together we form a mosaic of luminous diversity that nourishes the whole. Many worry that in the absence of traditional religious institutions, we risk losing the sense of community and connectedness they once provided. But what if community was never meant to be solely about uniformity of belief? What if the real gift of gathering lies in our ability to share presence and energy, rather than to recite the same creed in unison? The unraveling of monolithic structures has the potential to give birth to a new form of collective engagement, one that is no longer about imposed sameness, but about celebrating each person's distinct encounter with the sacred. In this reimagined community, the heart of togetherness is not dogma, but resonance. Instead of constructing a single doctrinal statement, everyone must affirm individuals come together in open-hearted inquiry. Circles form in yoga studios and quiet living rooms around bonfires by the beach. Whether physically or virtually, these gatherings create a web of spiritual fellowship that transcends borders. Each participant might hold different beliefs about the nature of the cosmos, the afterlife, or deity itself. Yet a deeper harmony unites them, a shared intention for growth, kindness, and authenticity. Such communities thrive on dialogue and reflective listening, acknowledging that truth can wear many faces. In these spaces, the question is not, do you believe exactly what I believe, but does your truth resonate with mine in a way that helps us both expand and deepen? This shift in focus fosters a synergy that allows for shared rituals or meditative practices without the need for rigid conformity. The result is a living tapestry that can adapt and evolve organically, unconstrained by doctrinal boundaries that no longer serve. Interestingly, this model of community mirrors the decentralization we see in the broader social, political, and technological arenas. From blockchain finance to open-source collaborations, a global cultural movement is pivoting away from rigid central authority toward distributed networks. In spiritual terms, we are witnessing the same phenomenon. The once tightly held keys to heaven are now scattered among the many. Each person holds a piece of the mystery, and through open exchange, we collectively illuminate a grander vision of what it means to be human and divine at once. These fluid, resonance-based communities serve as laboratories for new ways of relating to one another. How do we support each other's highest potential while honoring our diversity? How do we communicate when disagreements surface without resorting to shunning or dogmatic accusations? Such learning processes can be messy, but they hold the seed of a far more compassionate and adaptable society. This shift does not dismantle the notion of communal worship or prayer. Rather, it infuses it with a profound sense of liberation. We are no longer praying out of obligation or fear. We pray or meditate or hold sacred space together because our souls are drawn to that collective energy of reverence and awakening. In these circles, we realize community was never about forcing uniformity. It was always about co-creating a space in which the sacred is reflected in each other's eyes. The natural world itself is becoming our temple. Where once we built towering cathedrals and gilded statues to house the divine, we now remember that nature has always been a living tabernacle. In the rustle of leaves, the chorus of birds, the hush of dawn, and the roar of the ocean, we sense an ever-present sanctity that needs no formal invitation to be felt. This recognition does not belittle the majesty of historical temples or sacred sites. Rather, it expands our awareness to see that all of life is holy ground. Imagine stepping outside at first light. The horizon shifts from dark blue to gentle pink, and for a moment, you feel the heartbeat of the universe syncing with your own. In that silent communion, no priest's blessing is required, no scripture recited, just the raw, unmediated encounter with the ineffable. Many indigenous cultures have always held this perspective, viewing mountains, rivers, forests, and animals as sacred kin rather than resources to be exploited. As we awaken to this mindset, we realize how impoverished we become when we reduce the earth to mere objects of consumption. Reverence for nature rekindles an ancient memory that our ancestors cultivated long before religious hierarchies rose to power. This reconnection with nature dovetails with the ecological crises we face in the modern world. Recognizing that we share a common life force with all species fuels environmental stewardship as a spiritual imperative. The more we perceive the earth as alive and imbued with spirit, the less we can tolerate the exploitation and harm inflicted upon it. Care for the planet becomes not just a social responsibility, but a sacred duty. Protecting forests and oceans is no longer separate from prayer or meditation. It is the direct application of love for the living temple we inhabit together. Nature-based rituals are thus resurging, People gather for equinox and solstice celebrations, light bonfires under full moons, or practice forest bathing to realign with the Earth's rhythms. Far from being archaic or superstitious, these practices serve as powerful reminders of our interconnectedness. They bypass dogma by speaking straight to the body and the senses, evoking a visceral recognition of unity. Instead of worshipping from a distance, we participate in cycles of growth, decay, and rebirth that shape all living things. Moreover, this realignment with nature underscores the body as a microcosm of the earth. Many spiritual seekers now treat their own physical form as a sacred temple, honoring diet, movement, and rest as part of a holistic spiritual practice. Healing modalities such as Ayurveda, traditional Chinese medicine, or indigenous herbalism echo this recognition that our health is inseparable from the planet's health. In the Aquarian age, we see no clear boundary between personal well-being and collective flourishing. The healing of one fosters the healing of the other, and in that mutual care, the notion of temple expands exponentially. It is the body, the forest, the field, the sky, and every breath shared among all species. This grand mosaic of life, filled with an ever-shifting interplay of energies, reveals the infinite creativity and love at the heart of existence. A love that we can tap into whenever we breathe in tandem with the natural world. As Part 2 concludes, we stand at a threshold where we can sense the architecture of a new spiritual era emerging all around us. The end of religion as we once knew it does not herald a decline in devotion. Rather, it signals a blossoming of devotion in countless new forms. Spirituality is no longer pinned down to any single holy day or building, but permeates the entire tapestry of life. Everything from how we eat, sleep, and relate to each other can become a doorway to the sacred. We are in many ways returning to an ancient future, carrying forward the wisdom of ancestral traditions while weaving in the innovations of modern thought. The age of Aquarius extends an invitation to knit together reason and mysticism, science and spirituality, personal liberty and collective harmony. Skeptics may say that such integration is impossible or naive, but the very momentum we see, the dissolution of old hierarchies, the rise of personal discernment, the blossoming of eco-spiritual awareness suggests otherwise. With each passing day, the tapestry becomes more vivid. At the heart of this shift is love not as an abstract concept, but as a force that animates every aspect of life. When dogma recedes, a deeper love emerges, one that is fiercely empathetic and inclusive. It recognizes that if we are all facets of the divine, to injure another is to injure ourselves. To degrade the environment is to degrade our own temple. Hence, the moral impetus arises: naturally protect the vulnerable, celebrate diversity, honor the earth, and search for wisdom not by submission to external decrees, but by cultivating direct connection to the universal source. It is a gentle revolution. Instead of smashing stained glass or condemning those who remain in traditional faiths, we open our arms to the universal truths hidden beneath the layers of every religious tradition. Compassion is compassion. Prayer is prayer. Sacred music is sacred music. The forms may vary, but the essence remains the same, longing to unite with the infinite. Some will continue to find meaning in traditional churches, mosques, or temples. Others will find it in yoga studios, forests, or at-home altars. The age of Aquarius does not demand we all conform to one new system. It celebrates the multitude of ways to touch the divine spark. As we complete this second part, reflect on how these themes resonate in your life. Where are you finding your source of reverence, community, and inner guidance? Are you discovering new teachers that direct you inward? Are you forging communities that honor diverse truths, yet converge on shared values of empathy and growth? These questions open portals to your own evolving spirituality. And so we move forward, ready for part 3, the final chapter in this extended reflection. We will deepen our understanding of how to anchor Aquarian principles in daily existence, how to navigate the challenges of spiritual maturity, and how to embody the divine light we all carry. Let us continue this unfolding together. Welcome to part 3, where we delve into the practical dimensions of living out the shift we have been discussing. The age of Aquarius calls for a consciousness that embraces freedom, creativity, collaboration, and personal responsibility. Yet these ideals can remain lofty if we fail to anchor them in daily practices and perspectives. How do we embody this new form of spirituality so that it is not just an intellectual concept or an occasional weekend retreat experience, but an abiding truth woven through the fabric of our lives? Consider the notion of direct access to source, energy. These words are powerful, but what do they look like in the rhythm of ordinary life? Perhaps it begins with the morning waking up and taking a few moments before rushing into tasks to sense the profound mystery of simply being alive. You might engage in a gentle breathing exercise, feeling each inhale as a gift and each exhale as a release. Or maybe you place your hands over your heart, offering gratitude not to a distant deity, but to the quietly pulsating life force within. Such simple acts might seem small, but over time they accumulate, forging a relationship with the sacred that does not depend on external ceremony or validation. As the day unfolds, the practice continues in the spaces between tasks. For instance, when conflict arises at work or at home, instead of reacting from a conditioned script, you pause to check in with your inner compass. Does this align with the love and authenticity I aim to embody? This practice of pausing shifts the dynamic. It aligns you with the Aquarian principle that you hold the authority for how you respond, and that your response inevitably shapes not only your life, but the energetic field around you. Connection with others also changes under this new paradigm. Whether you're having a casual chat or a deeper conversation, you maintain an inner attunement. You listen more intently, not just for the words, but for the resonance behind them. This form of presence can transform interactions into sacred exchanges. Even if you do not mention spirituality explicitly, the openness and sincerity in your gaze, the authenticity in your voice communicate that you regard the other person as a fellow traveler on the path. You might be the only one in that moment who silently sees them in their full divinity, and that shift in perspective can be enough to alter the energy of the entire conversation. Likewise, in creative pursuits, whether painting, writing, cooking, or gardening, you can frame these activities as acts of communion. You are communing with your own divine spark, translating an internal vision into the external world. The line between mundane and sacred dissolves, for everything becomes a potential portal to deeper awareness. This is how spirituality becomes intimately braided with life, not a separate domain reserved for Sunday mornings or retreat centers, but an ongoing love affair with existence itself. And as this sense of direct communion grows, you realize that you never really left church at all, because church was never a building. It was the living space of your heart. Even as we open to this expanded spirituality, challenges inevitably arise. For instance, what about relationships with family or friends who remain committed to traditional religious frameworks? This can be delicate territory. The Aquarian shift does not command us to abandon compassion or mutual understanding. Indeed, it calls us to practice them more deeply. Rather than judging or ridiculing those who hold fast to old paradigms, consider the possibility that they too might be walking a path that nourishes them in ways not immediately apparent. They might find community solace and purpose in those traditions. Conversely, they may regard your newfound spiritual autonomy as bewildering or threatening, especially if it challenges their core beliefs. Approach these situations with empathy, grounded in the recognition that each soul has its own journey, shaped by cultural, familial, and personal karmic threads. Enter conversations with curiosity rather than the need to prove or disprove anything. Listen to their stories, their concerns, and reflect on shared values, kindness, generosity, love. By focusing on universal truths rather than doctrinal differences, you may find fertile ground for mutual respect. This does not mean you must dim your light or hide your evolving perspectives. It means you offer them gently, remembering that transformation is often a gradual process. Another challenge is the pull of doubt. Without the safety net of rigid dogma, you may face existential questions. Who am I to claim a connection to the divine? Am I deceiving myself? The mind, conditioned by centuries of external authority, may try to undermine your intuitive knowing. Here it is crucial to build trust in the quiet voice within. Practices like meditation, journaling, or contemplative walks can help you track the subtle shifts in your inner world. Notice how you feel when you align with your intuitive promptings versus when you ignore them. Over time, the evidence accumulates enough small confirmations to reassure you that your path is valid and that your direct communion with the sacred is far from an illusion. In some cases, people experience a sense of loss. Old rituals and communal gatherings once anchored their sense of belonging. Stepping into personal sovereignty can feel lonely at first, especially if community is slow to reform. This transitional loneliness is a rite of passage, a space in which you learn to rely on your internal guidance. However, you need not remain isolated indefinitely. Gradually, you may discover or attract others who resonate with the new frequency you inhabit. It might be in a local meditation circle, an online forum, or a chance meeting at a bookstore. The threads of spiritual connection weave themselves in mysterious ways, often more organically than institutional membership ever allowed. Above all, grace yourself with patience. A seed does not become a flowering plant overnight. The dismantling of centuries-old religious frameworks and the reorientation toward direct personal communion with the divine is an epic shift in human consciousness. Each of us navigates it at our own pace. Be gentle with yourself when old fears arise or when you find yourself missing the comfort of certainty. The path of sovereignty is not about never stumbling. It is about learning to walk with integrity even when the terrain feels unstable. The key element to anchoring the Aquarian energy is discernment, a word we've already touched upon but merits deeper exploration. Discernment is often conflated with judgment, yet they differ significantly. Judgment can be harsh, reactive, and ego-driven. Discernment, on the other hand, is a clear seeing that arises from a balanced mind and an open heart. It evaluates a situation, teaching, or relationship based on how it resonates with authentic values and the direct guidance of one's inner compass. In the swirl of new spiritual movements, techniques, and teachers' discernment is indispensable. Someone might proclaim they channel higher beings or hold cosmic secrets, but does your heart resonate, or do you sense a misalignment? Another might present a method for instantaneous enlightenment, does it feel like a genuine invitation for transformation, or a shortcut promising results without genuine work? Discernment encourages you to listen to your body's intelligence, the goosebumps of recognition, or the tightness of caution. When used properly, discernment protects you from false claims while keeping you open to genuine revelations. At a deeper level, discernment also guides you through the labyrinth of your own conditioning. You might realize that some of your desires and beliefs are inherited rather than self-originated. In this sense, discernment becomes a tool for inner deprogramming, identifying the difference between what your soul longs for and what society, religion, or family tradition has taught you to want. This can be both liberating and unsettling. In the vacuum left by deconstructed beliefs, you learn to trust the subtle voice inside that says, "Yes, this is mine," or "No, that no longer serves me." Of course, it takes time to refine discernment. Early in your journey, you might swing between gullible openness and rigid skepticism. But each experience, whether it leads to awe or disappointment, shapes your inner clarity. Over time, you cultivate a steady center that cannot be easily swayed by charismatic figures or sensational claims. You also learn to watch for hidden motivations both in yourself and others. Is your pursuit of certain spiritual experiences fueled by genuine longing for growth, or by an egoic need to appear more enlightened than others? In a world moving away from top-down religious control, discernment is what ensures our collective exploration remains anchored in genuine transformation rather than devolving into chaos or commodification. Through this lens, the age of Aquarius becomes a vast field of possibility. No longer fenced in by external dogma, we have the freedom to explore the infinite nuances of our spiritual nature. Yet with that freedom comes the responsibility to remain sober in our exploration. We are each the guardians of our own temple, and through careful discernment, we ensure that temple remains a space of authenticity, love, and clear perception. This ensures that the new era truly reflects the highest potentials of human evolution and not just another cycle of deception, albeit cloaked in fresh terminology. Freedom is the clarion call of this new age, but what does it really entail? Beyond the absence of oppression, freedom is the capacity to align your life with your highest truths. It is a creative act requiring engagement with your whole being, mind, body, heart, and spirit. In the spiritual context, freedom means you no longer carry the chains of inherited guilt, shame, or fear as impetus for your relationship with the divine. You are free to discover, make mistakes, and evolve based on lived experience rather than second-hand rules. Paradoxically, freedom can be intimidating. For those accustomed to being told what is right and wrong, the open field of possibility may feel overwhelming. It can be tempting to replace old religious rules with new dogmas, perhaps a strict lifestyle regimen or a rigid moral code gleaned from a modern spiritual movement. While structure can be helpful, the critical difference is that in true freedom you consciously choose the disciplines or frameworks that serve your growth, rather than adopting them out of fear or a desire to conform. One hallmark of spiritual freedom is a new kind of devotion, one born not from compulsion, but from love. Imagine waking up and sensing a call to pray or meditate not because a church bell tolls or a text demands it, but because your soul yearns for that connection. Or consider the impulse to act compassionately, not out of dread that a vengeful God will punish you, but because you feel an innate unity with all beings. This is devotion without dogma, service without civility, and reverence without restriction. Such devotion fosters a sense of joy and fulfillment, unmatched by any externally enforced practice. Still, freedom requires vigilance. Without external constraints, we must cultivate our internal ethical compass. If we are to create a world where freedom does not descend into narcissistic chaos, we must remain attuned to the ripple effects of our choices. A truly free individual recognizes that while they have the liberty to act in countless ways, not all actions are beneficial or life-affirming. The guiding principle becomes not, am I allowed, but is this aligned with my deepest values and the collective good? Furthermore, freedom in the Aquarian context carries a quality of responsible co-creation. We begin to see that our thoughts, emotions, and intentions serve as contributions to the collective energy field. This realization motivates us to refine and uplift our inner state, not because some external authority demands it, but because we realize how directly we shape the shared reality. We become stewards of frequency, consciously choosing what we broadcast into the world. Thus, freedom is not a license to do whatever we please at others' expense. It is an invitation to embody the highest expressions of love, creativity, and mutual flourishing. Embracing such freedom transforms every moment into a sacred opportunity to align with the evolving dance of existence, forging a life that resonates with authenticity and contributes to the well-being of all. With the crumbling of traditional religious frameworks, we also face the question of purpose. Religion often provided meaning through doctrines of salvation, narratives about humanity's role in the cosmos, and rituals that gave rhythm to daily life. In a reality untethered from these predefined scripts, how do we construct or discover meaning for ourselves? The answer is deeply personal, yet certain universal themes emerge. One path to meaning arises through service. Freed from the notion that we must earn divine favor by following prescribed dogmas, we recognize that helping others is a profound expression of our interconnectedness. This could manifest as volunteering activism, creative mentorship, or any other action that uplifts people or the planet. Such service becomes a spiritual practice not in order to collect heavenly points, but because giving ignites a sense of unity and expands our capacity to love. The fulfillment that arises in being of service to life reminds us that ironically we find ourselves most fully when we transcend self-centered concerns. Another avenue of purpose is creativity, the spark of divine co-creation within us. Whether through art, writing, invention, or even the way we approach parenting or entrepreneurship, creativity allows us to express the infinite potential of the universe in a unique, individualized form. In the absence of religious mandates, creativity can feel like a sacred conversation with the cosmos, a giving and receiving that nourishes both the maker and those who witness or benefit from it. The third dimension is inner growth. As we align with the energies of the Aquarian age, a sense of evolutionary impetus often arises in awareness that personal development is not just for personal gain, but also for collective harmony. We recognize that every insight, every healed wound contributes to a larger tapestry of human transformation. Here, meaning emerges from the profound realization that our own journey of self-realization directly impacts the collective field of consciousness. In this sense, personal healing becomes planetary healing. Finally, some find purpose in fostering community, cultivating networks or circles that model the ideals of authenticity, acceptance, and co-creative synergy. In a world transitioning from top-down religious orders, these emergent communities are like seedlings of a new forest. They may be small and fragile at first, but they carry the codes of a different kind of togetherness, one where each participant's worth is acknowledged where wisdom is shared freely and where mutual respect forms the foundation of every gathering. Purpose in the Aquarian age, therefore, is less about adhering to a cosmic script handed down from on high, and more about identifying the threads that feel most alive in our hearts. Whether through service, creativity, inner growth, community, or a blend of them all, we weave a life that resonates with the bigger flow of universal intelligence. And in doing so, we find ourselves part of a grand symphony, no longer needing permission to join, because we realize we were part of it all along. This reflection would be incomplete without addressing mysticism, the direct, often wordless encounter with the sacred. While religions frequently claim to champion, mystics' history shows a pattern of suspicion or outright persecution of those whose spiritual encounters bypassed institutional frameworks. Yet mysticism refuses to be contained. It thrives on experiences that reveal unity with the cosmic essence dissolving the boundaries of identity. The Age of Aquarius is in many respects an age of returning mysticism to the people, an unmediated relationship with the divine, accessible through practices like deep meditation, contemplative prayer, dream work, or spontaneous peak experiences in nature. Mystical openings can be awe-inspiring and humbling. They often defy logic, presenting paradoxical insights, sudden realizations that time is fluid or that consciousness pervades all creation. These experiences can feel like glimpses behind the veil, expanding the mind beyond ordinary perception. With them comes a challenge. How do we integrate such revelations back into daily life? Without integration, mystical flashes can become ephemeral highs, leaving us craving further experiences without grounding them in meaningful change. Integration involves humility. A mystical epiphany does not make one special in a hierarchical sense. It simply unveils a layer of reality that has always been present. In the new paradigm, mystical experiences do not elevate us above others. Rather, they deepen our empathy, compassion, and responsibility to share our insights for the good of all. The value of these experiences lies in how they transform us, widening our hearts, refining our moral compass, and softening our judgments. Importantly, mysticism in an Aquarian context encourages equality. No single prophet or saint holds a monopoly on divine communion. We each carry seeds of the infinite within us. And if nurtured, those seeds can bloom into direct encounters with grace. The universal accessibility of these states marks a profound democratization of the sacred. Where once a cloister or a mountaintop seemed necessary, now a quiet corner of one's home or a simple walk under the moon can serve as a portal to deep insight. Technology's role in disseminating meditation techniques, breathwork practices, and esoteric teachings also levels the playing field. Such an egalitarian approach does not diminish the mystery. If anything, it amplifies our wonder. It prompts a deep recognition that the cosmos is infinitely alive, that consciousness is woven into every particle, and that our quest for the divine is not a solitary journey, but a shared awakening. In this sense, mysticism ceases to be an esoteric niche and becomes a collective birthright, a call to remember that beneath our diverse stories, we all stem from and return to the same boundless source. The Age of Aquarius thus reclaims mysticism for every beating heart, ensuring that the direct experience of unity is not an isolated phenomenon, but a wave that can reshape societies from within. The old paradigm often framed the divine as a distant ruler, some version of God seated on a throne surrounded by the pomp of heavenly courts. Worship was approached as an act of bowing and acknowledgement of human inferiority. But in this Aquarian shift, worship has evolved into illumination from within. We no longer perceive God as separate or removed from our day-to-day existence. The sacred saturates our consciousness, illuminating the path forward. In practical terms, this illumination translates into a lifestyle of living prayer. Rather than periodic visits to a place of worship, every action can become an offering. The way you cook a meal, the manner in which you hug a loved one, or the focus you bring to creative work, all can be infused with reverence. This does not require elaborate religious paraphernalia. It only necessitates an open heart. Such a life lived in perpetual communion unites the spiritual and the material realms into a seamless tapestry. Illumination from within also reframes the concept of seeking. In the Piscean age, the narrative often revolved around searching for God out there, ascending through levels of spiritual discipline to reach a distant heaven. Now we look inward, realizing that the light we once yearned for dwells quietly at our center. Awakening is less about upward ascent and more about inward descent, journeying into the deep caverns of the self, where the spark of divinity has been patiently waiting. Once discovered, that spark acts like a sun, radiating outward, influencing thoughts, emotions, relationships, and eventually the larger social sphere. Crucially, this illumination does not imply that life becomes eternally blissful. Challenges still arise, and pain remains an integral part of the human experience. The difference is that even in sorrow or difficulty, one's core sense of connection to the infinite remains unbroken. Life's storms may rage, but the inner anchor holds. We begin to see adversity as part of a larger tapestry of growth, an opportunity to refine and deepen our relationship with that inner light. This perspective enriches how we approach death as well. No longer merely a feared boundary, death becomes another transition in an endless flow of transformation. Illuminated from within, we sense that consciousness is not extinguished, but changes form. Religious concepts of heaven or hell may be replaced or supplemented by direct intuitions of continuity. Such intuitions alleviate existential dread, replacing it with a sober reverence for the cycles of life, death, and rebirth that permeate the cosmos. As the old walls of religion crumble, what rises is a soulful autonomy, a radical trust that each of us has the capacity to host the divine presence within. The shift is not from worship to atheism, but from external worship to internal radiance. We find God not by gazing at lofty ceilings, but by closing our eyes, dipping into the ocean of silence, and emerging with the realization that we too are embodiments of the sacred. This is the heartbeat of the new age, that each human being can be a beacon, contributing their unique frequency to a collective illumination that no institution can contain. We arrive at the decline of organized religion, not as a tragedy, but as a release into an expanded spiritual landscape. Far from eradicating the sacred, this shift reveals that the divine was never confined to a singular building or dogma. The historical concentration of spiritual power in clerical elites is giving way to a decentralized model, where every soul, every life experience, every vantage point has equal potential to access and express the infinite. We see the practical implications, the closure of traditional churches, the repurposing of grand cathedrals into community spaces, the conversion of once solemn temples into educational centers for interfaith dialogue or cultural innovation. Attendance statistics may show empty pews, but those numbers only tell part of the story. The deeper story is one of transformation rather than abandonment. People have not stopped asking life's big questions. They have simply stopped waiting for permission to ask them. They no longer rely exclusively on institutional gatekeepers for guidance. Instead, they embark on their own pilgrimages, sometimes physical, often internal. They experiment with mindfulness, delve into esoteric teachings, or engage in grassroots spiritual gatherings that are more resonant with their lived experiences. This newly emerging spiritual topography does not necessarily exclude the old ways. Some individuals deeply fond of their religious heritage remain within their chosen faith, but practice it in more open-minded, inclusive ways. Interfaith gatherings illustrate that what unites us is far greater than what divides us. Compassion, empathy, and awe are universal experiences transcending the differences of theology or ritual. In the age of Aquarius, the line between inside and outside religion blurs. Those in institutional religions often incorporate practices once deemed alternative, while those outside find wisdom in the historical roots of religious tradition. Bridges form where once there were fences. This dissolving boundary is further expedited by technology. Sermons once confined to a local parish can now be live-streamed worldwide. Spiritual influencers, for better or worse, reach audiences of millions on social media. Diversity of opinion flourishes, fueling both debate and cross-pollination of ideas. While this digital environment can breed misinformation, it also paves the way for dialogues that previously couldn't exist. Where once an individual in a remote area might have felt isolated in their questioning, they can now connect with kindred spirits around the globe. These virtual networks reinforce the notion that the sacred is a shared human inheritance, not a localized commodity. We are witnessing then not a crisis of faith, but a renaissance of divinity, in which spirituality becomes more personalized, vibrant, and integrated with everyday life. The fall of religion in its ossified form opens the door for spirituality that is more fluid and adaptable, a living river rather than a stagnant pond. It's a call to action, an invitation to each of us to pick up the mantle of spiritual stewardship and create the communities and rituals that nurture the soul in ways that feel alive, relevant, and real. This metamorphosis isn't just about forging new pathways. It's about remembering the original impetus behind all religion, the quest to touch the ineffable mystery that weaves us all into one cosmic tapestry. With organized religion, waning collective consciousness takes center stage. No longer do we look for spiritual unity solely in cathedrals or the voice of a single leader. Instead, the entire planet is becoming a stage for our shared evolution. In part, this shift is fueled by urgent global crises, climate change, social inequality, political upheaval that demand a deeper realization of our interconnectedness. As we face these challenges, we realize that the old divisions of creed, nationality, or cultural identity cannot withstand the necessity for collective cooperation. On the energetic level, many talk about a rising vibration or an upgrade in frequency. While these terms can sound abstract, they point to tangible changes in how we perceive our identity. We start to sense that we are more than isolated individuals. We are strands in a vast web of consciousness that includes all living beings and, arguably, the Earth itself. This expanded sense of identity nurtures empathy, inspiring us to take collective action. Rather than waiting for a religious institution to mobilize relief efforts, communities self-organize, responding with grassroots initiatives to global needs. In this newly forming collective consciousness, the notion of "we are all one" is no longer a religious cliché, but a lived truth that can guide decision-making. If we truly accept oneness, can we exploit or oppress another part of ourselves? This is not to say we instantly resolve all conflict, but the framework for addressing conflict changes. Instead of seeing an adversary as an outsider, we begin to see them as a mirror of our unhealed aspects. Someone reflecting back parts of ourselves we would rather not face. The battlefield of spirituality thus moves inward toward shadow work and emotional integration and outward toward global empathy and cooperation. This collective rise in consciousness also ties back to creativity and innovation. In the Aquarian blueprint, solutions to social and environmental issues often emerge through collaborative efforts. Imagine a circle of diverse minds, each bringing unique insights unconstrained by dogmatic limitations. Brainstorming becomes a spiritual act, guided not by a single authority, but by the synergy of interlinked insights. Technology can facilitate these connections, turning the world into an interactive laboratory for human potential. Spiritual synergy merges with collaborative invention, fueling breakthroughs in sustainable energy, ethical governance, and social harmony. Hence, what emerges is a vision of church or temple that expands to include the entire human family, the entire biosphere. Collective consciousness is the new sanctuary, a living dynamic temple woven from individual realizations of unity. This expansion does not eliminate personal belief systems or private devotions. Rather, it accommodates them within a holistic tapestry. People can still read sacred texts, chant mantras, or follow ancestral rituals, but the impetus behind these practices shifts from compliance to genuine participation in a cosmic dance. We each hold a note in the universal symphony, and collective consciousness is the grand composition guiding us toward a more harmonious convergence of energies. Through this lens, the collapse of external religious structures is simply the unveiling of an infinitely larger, more inclusive and more radiant spiritual architecture. Thus, we arrive at the threshold of a profound realization the divine has always lived within us, and the monumental shifts we see in religious institutions are merely external reflections of an inner awakening. You are never truly separated from God, source the universe, or the great mystery, choose whichever name resonates. The tradition that told you otherwise was itself part of an ancient drama leading to this very moment of remembrance. You need not feel bitterness at the old systems. You can honor them for carrying the flame through darker ages, even if they sometimes obscured its light with rigid structures and dogmas. Now, with that flame uncovered, you have the freedom and responsibility to nurture it in your own heart. Whether you call this personal flame Christ consciousness, higher self inner Buddha, or simply awareness, it represents your direct line to the infinite. No ceremony, no permission, no sacrament is required to validate it. It pulses in your breath. It hums in your bloodstream. In the hush of midnight, when your mind finally grows quiet, you can feel it calling you home. And that home is not a physical location. It's the seat of consciousness where you realize your eternal connection. As you walk this path of sovereignty, remember that you do not walk alone. Countless others across the globe are in their own ways awakening to the same truth. They might use different languages or frameworks, but the essence is the same, a reclamation of sacredness that was never truly lost. In this global mosaic, every awakened heart is like a lighthouse, casting beams of authenticity, compassion, and courage into a world desperately in need of all three. Indeed, our world is in turmoil politically, socially, ecologically, but it is also in bloom. Just as a seed cracks open in darkness, so too does humanity break through old shells of ignorance and fear. As you stand in your sovereignty, Your radiance contributes to a collective shift. Your steady heart, grounded in direct communion, becomes part of a network that transcends geography. And in this network, the old question of which religion is right fades away, replaced by a deeper inquiry. How can I embody the fullest expression of love and wisdom in this life I've been given? In this final reflection, let these words be a mirror reflecting back to you the truth you have always carried. The age of the middleman is ending. The age of the awakened human is dawning. You are not losing your faith, you are reclaiming it in a form that resonates with the core of your being. In that reclamation lies the potential for healing, personal, collective, and planetary. It begins with a quiet, yes, a gentle acknowledgement that you are not a pilgrim on a far-off road, but a temple in your own right, a vessel of living light. And so we close this expansive journey. May you walk gently, yet boldly, carrying your unique frequency into the hidden voyage of everyday life. May you find in your breath, your heart, and your very bones the living presence of what many have called divine. This is not the end of spiritual seeking. It is the beginning of your direct remembering. Personally, I find tremendous hope in this evolution where religion isn't ending but blossoming into something deeper and more intimate. We're not losing our connection to the sacred. We're rediscovering it within ourselves, in our everyday lives, in our quiet moments of reflection. This journey isn't about rejecting tradition, but embracing the powerful truth that each of us carries the spark of divinity inside. I'd love to hear your perspective on this transformative shift. Do you feel excited, hesitant, or perhaps somewhere in between? Let's continue the conversation in the comments below. Your voice matters, and sharing your insights helps us all grow together. Remember to subscribe for more meaningful discussions. Let's navigate this beautiful journey of awakening side by side.